My first question is about the 1912 discovery. So I was looking into it, and it seems like it was discovered by two people that were not. So one was an academic was a Cambridge geologist, but the other wasn't really an academic. He was a cave art expert. And how did they go? How did they end up in this little cave in a very remote place in Wales, in Goa, in 1912? And so that's the first question. And on that note, and on that, following that, how was that treated at the time? Was it because the Guardian says that they reported it at the time, so it seems like it was something to be found, and it was treated as an interesting discovery, even by the media.
I'll just say one word, and the word is Altamira. So Altamira in northern Spain had been ignored for quite some time. The rock art, these beautiful sleeping bisons, had been discovered in the 1880s. Then completely trashed by the academic community, and it wasn't until 1902, so that's just 10 years before this discovery in South Wales, that rock art was actually recognised as a prehistoric entity. And that's when the Abbé Broyel, the famous French priest, who then became the father of prehistory, started to go around Europe verifying various parts of prehistoric Europe, early prehistoric Europe. And I think he may have been in correspondence with Professor William Sollis, who actually came from Oxford University. He was a geologist, and William Sollis was working on a cave not too far from Baconhole called Paveland Cave, or for those of you who are purists, Goat's Hole Cave. And he was looking at the last bit of stratigraphy that survived in that cave, and it was quite remarkable in that he managed to get nearly a complete sequence of lithic or flint technology from the Mesolithic right through to the Augmenation, which is the early part of the Upper Paleolithic, so around about 30,000 years ago. And so they met up, and I think they were friends. They went to a number of cave sites, and they eventually ended up at Baconhole. Now, just to put that into context, if you go there today, and you would have gone there in 1912, it's a very dangerous approach to the cave. You can't suffer from vertigo, and you certainly have got to be very careful where you walk. So they trundled down to that cave, or went down to that cave, got inside it, and they found a series of 10 red bars, horizontal bars, in a side chamber of the main gallery. And Broyle instantly said, "This is the first evidence we have of Paleolithic art in the British Isles," which was big news. So the New York Times got hold of the story, the Manchester Guardian got hold of the story, and it went around the world. Then after that, thank goodness, a guy called William Morgan went down there in 1913, so 1 year after the discovery. He then did what I would call a very, very decent scientific for that time in history. He did a recent scientific survey, reasonable scientific survey on the discovery, and that was published in Archaeology Cambrensis, which is the main archaeological journey for Wales, was then and is now. And from that point onwards, they put a gate up to protect it because they didn't want anybody going in there vandalizing it. If you go down there now, you'll see lots of graffiti, both written and painted graffiti all over the walls, luckily not over the panel where these 10 bars are. And so it was protected. However, by 1928, I think from successive visits made by the Ministry of Works archaeologists who would verify it or just keep an eye on it, they lost it. They couldn't find it, and I think it's because of the conditions, the microclimate conditions inside the cave, which changes the transparency of the calcite flow over the painting to opaque. And if it's opaque, you can't see it, or you can't see it very well. And if you're not a specialist in prehistoric art, you won't see it at all. I can promise you that.
So as I understand it, it seems like for about 90 years or so, there was people going into the cave and trying. So it never really got lost. in the annals of the history and prehistoric art, there was always people going into the cave and trying to figure out what it was,
or trying to look for it,
or trying to look for, or trying to look for it.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the main reason why it got dismissed a long time, it was not like a process of, we found it, we think it's Paleolithic art, and then someone came a few years later and said, no, it's not. It's just that it kind of like the conditions, the geological conditions inside the cave started covering it with calcite, with the flowstone, right? And it obscured the panel, and along the years it became kind of forgotten. Hidden. In a way.
It got forgotten, but also there was a little bit of a controversy as well, which I didn't mention, in that somebody had admitted that they used those lines were actually brush strokes from a fisherman who was cleaning his red paint off a brush, and that was a quite big story then at time in 1912. And I think the guy was made to apologise that he had told a lie. And also the other thing is as well to consider, there's the name Bacon Hole had stood since 1802, if not before, because of the streaks of streaky bacon-like hematite which is incorporated into the limestone, and so people instantly thought it was just a geological feature. So that's another reason why it sort of faded into obscurity, because of that situation.
Okay, and so how did it go from that situation to people actually thinking, no, we should look at this again, right, and we should look at this again with another set of eyes and another set of methods?
Many years before we went there in 2022, I used to work for Bristol University, where I taught for 19 years, and I, as part of the introduction to first year students, was to take them to cave sites to see what the Paleolithic are doing, look at the lithics if possible, look at the sort of the ambience of the setting, etc. And one of the caves I used to take them to, or try and take them to, was Pavilion Cave, which is a really difficult, dangerous approach to get to. So I was warned by my head of department we probably shouldn't be doing it because of insurance issues, and I agreed with him. So I had to look for another cave, and so I equally looked for somewhere equally as stupid, which was Bacon Hole, because it has a quite dangerous approach. But most of the students were young and they're fitter than me. So I thought, well, if I can do it, they can do it. So we would take, over about 4 or 5 year period, people down to Bacon Hole, and I would tell them the story about the lost streaks or the lost bars of the discovery that was made in 1912, and then we tried to look for it, never found it, only because of that opaqueness of the calcite. And again, if you go there today, there is very much a very strong calcite flow over it, which is white, so it's very difficult to see. And for one reason or another, we had a big problem with a filming project that we were doing in 2021, 2022, which was looking at Paleolithic art in Europe. So we were going to Spain, France, Italy, and because of permissions and whatever, we had to sort of organise an emergency group of sites in the UK. So we went to the Mendips, we went to South Wales on the Gower, and so one of those sites was Bacon Hole. So we went in there, and Barbara was with us. Barbara was doing the filming, like we were in front of camera, and she just turned to me one day and said, "Hey George, are those red lines you've been looking for?" And it just blew my mind. I said, yes. I went absolutely ballistic. I just really was overjoyed to see it. And because she was doing her PhD at Exeter, she was about to sort of hand the damn thing in, so she couldn't get involved. So I immediately sort of said, right, I'll take control of this one, because I knew what to do. I had dealt with the National Trust in Wales before. I dealt with CADU, which is the Heritage Agency in Wales, before. So we had good synergy, good conversations, and it was then decided that we would then try and date it. So we've dated it, and also more importantly, we've protected it as well, because the last thing I did at Bacon Hall was to do an excavation across the side chamber, so we could put a steel grill in there to protect the bats, because the bats are again protected by the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, so protected by law. And so the grill went up, and now it's protected, and hopefully in years to come there'll be more research. I'm hoping there'll be more research now we know where the thing is. But as a side answer to that as well, we've also found new art on the other side opposite the Bacon Hole bars that was discovered in 1912. So it's a very, very exciting period of my life to be looking at something like this, and also to rediscover it thanks to Barbara.
Yeah, and that was exactly what I was going to ask. It's how do you feel, because it's, in a way, the Guardian article says it was dismissed, but it was not really dismissed as in terms of scientific discovery. It was just a lot of people, yeah, exactly, just forgotten. So, but now you didn't just find it again. You've added a layer of research onto it, because the people who discovered it in the early 20th century, they didn't have all these methods that we do have, that we have now. And so I'm sure that it was not just a great excitement to have found it again, but also to be able to add something more to it. And so you didn't know that this was probably the oldest record of rock art by the time you refound the paintings.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. You just actually raised a very interesting point there, in that when we look at rock art, if I'd have been sitting with you now talking 30, 40 years ago, we'd be looking at style. So we look at the style of the bisons in Altamira, looking at the Lascaux red deer, and the bisons and the horses, and we'll be using style to try and date that bit of rock art. You can't date the rock art of 10 bars through style. That's the big problem. And I think Broyle took a massive guess by saying this is the first prehistoric rock art we have in the British Isles, which is Paleolithic in date. I think it was a very brave thing to say, and I'm really pleased he did. So I actually sort of aroused my suspicions about it. And so today in 2026 we have that luxury that we can take a tiny, minute sub-gram sample. We can test it for Raman spectroscopy, i.e. look at the recipe. Are there other things in it? Because remember, it's hematite. They aren't just plastering hematite onto the walls. They have to mix it with something to make it pliable. So they're mixing it with water. It could be milk. It could be urine. It could be yogurt. It could be anything that is a fluid. And so we did Raman spectroscopy on the pigments. We also used samples to date it as well, and we got in two very, very good dating teams. The first art team, of course, which operates from Portugal and Spain, from our institution, and we also used the skills of Alistair Pike from the University of Southampton, who incidentally has done work like this before, and we also used Zhao Quangfeng Shao, from the University of Nanjing, or Nanjing Normal University in China. So we got a series of collaborative dates which worked very well. The only problem is we've only got one date for the earliest date, which is 17,100 years ago, and I'm sure that with future dating we can actually maybe position that as a secure date. So we were very fortunate to use all this fantastic science, and not only that, we also used a thing called D-stretch, which my colleagues within the first art team use all the time. I use it all the time as well. So we actually saw things which we couldn't see with the naked eye. So the first thing we came across was little finger dots, which were probably made by children, and we also had what we call projected spit patterns coming through. So the artist may have put in his mouth or her mouth pigment and gone over the over certain parts of the panel. So we managed to extract dates and pigment samples for Ramus spectroscopy as well. And the dating method we were using was uranium thorium dating. So, and we did it in two expeditions, 2023 and 2024. So really, we did do a really good job on the panel and got these fantastic bits of information, which really is revolutionary, especially in the British Isles. As you may have gathered with your homework, there are only 3 Paleolithic sites: Cresswell Crags, Cat Hole Cave, which I made the discovery of back in 2010, and now Bacon Hole. So it's just a fantastic. I'm in a fantastic time of my life to be witnessing this stuff.
When I was looking at the pictures of the paper and the pictures you took inside the cave, and me not being very far from knowing much about rock art, or I know more about rock rather than the art part.
Yes, absolutely.
It came to my mind something, well, probably very naive, but I'll ask it anyway.
Go on.
In most of the rock art that we associate as lay people of rock art, we can at least identify some geometrical, either the minimum that we can identify is geometrical shapes. Let's say there's a spiral or something that might resemble a sun. Very often you see human figures, or what you could call hominid figures, or you see deer or animals. But in Bacon Hole, there's stripes. There's horizontal stripes.
Yeah.
So can you talk a bit more about that, because it's very different from what we are used to see as rock art, and what comes up to someone's mind when you say rock art.
Yes, if I talk to a student and I talk about Paleolithic art, parental art, the instant thing you get in your mind is the Lascaux and the Altamiras in your head. Beautiful paintings, anatomically perfect, but they only account for maybe 30% of the total rock art that is found from that period across the whole of Europe. So my colleague Genevieve, who's in the next room, in fact, her ambitions has been to look at non-figurative art. She looks at what we call geometric signs, and I get it. However, I would also say that the 10 bars that we have within Bacon Hole really are part of that geometric set of symbols that we see within the other 70% of Paleolithic art. And so, for example, to put it in a more personal context, when we were doing the filming many years ago, and also the recording that I've done throughout Europe, the majority of the stuff that I've encountered has been geometric forms. So every cave that has figurative art has geometric art as well. It could be chronologically spaced. Remember, we are talking about 20,000 years from the start of the Paleolithic right through to the end of the Paleolithic, and it could be that in that 16,000 years there could have been changes in ideology, which would have forced people to start off, first of all, thinking about doing geometric forms, but then that morphs into figurative or semi-figurative forms to figurative forms, then back to geometric forms. And I think that's what we've got. And it's all about the way the mindset is working in that long period of time. It could be to do with climate. It could be to do with the politic of the day and also the influences of the day, or it could be a combination of all 3.
So it could be exactly as it can be today, in a way, right?
Yeah. Here's a classic example for you. Think about the golden M, the yellow golden M that we see in the modern world, right? It means McDonald's, right? So that sign means hamburgers, it means fish burgers, it means McFlurries, whatever, okay? And for those of you who are into McDonald's, you salivate just by looking at that golden M. And so it's very much a semiotic sign, which you would see. Yeah. And it could be not just McDonald's, it could be KFC. It all has meaning. And I think this is what we've got here. Those 10 bars may have a very complex meaning behind them. So again, for listeners and viewers, think about the Christian cross. A very, very simple thing to produce.
Just
one line down, one line across. However, it has a monumental meaning to Christians and to non-Christians about what that means to individuals who are either following it or opposed to it. So again, some very interesting things we can think about in terms of what those bars mean. I think they are very, very complex signatures in the Paleolithic 17,000 years ago or before. Remember, the dates we've got on those bars is a minimum date, so it could be more than 17,100 years old. It could be maybe 10,000 years earlier. We don't know.
Who were the people doing these things?
Right, I can tell you that one as well. That's one thing I can tell you. We do know that at the time of 17,100, that the Bristol Channel, which is a large chunk of water which separates Wales from southwest England, if we see that today, we see a vast expanse of water, and it's been fed by tidal and also by the River Severn, which is the largest river we have in the British Isles, flowing into it. However, 17,100 years ago and before, if I would look north behind the cave, there would be about a kilometre and a half of ice, and the Bristol Channel would have been a flat plateau or flattish plateau, and within that plateau would have been sedges, lichens and grasses, which would have attracted obviously megafauna such as mammoth, horse, bison, reindeer and elk, amongst other things. And they would have come across here seasonally, usually in the winter months, when the winter months were around about -10, so very, very cold indeed. But it would have attracted hunter-fisher-gatherers from either south of the Bristol Channel to follow them, or if they were brave enough to occupy the 95 caves along the Gower coast, who would be looking out for them during the summer months. And so that's where you get your hunter-gatherers from. Now, remember that all Paleolithic communities were occupying the entrance areas of those caves, not the far deep inner workings of Bacon Hole or any other cave along that coastline. And so all the lithic evidence that we should find has been washed away into the Bristol Channel.
So it's for me, it's fantastic how the story, and someone who's very whose job is somehow to tell stories, science stories, but nonetheless stories. The story that you can make out of 10 or 9 or 11 hematite bars painted on a limestone. What next? So what next for Bacon Hall? What next for rock art in Britain? And you just said that we only have about three. There's three, right? Three examples of Paleolithic art in Britain. What's next?
Right. Well, I told you there are 3 official sites. There are another 3 or 4 sites. A couple in the Wye Valley, which is near Hereford, between Hereford and Chepstow, which is in the west of Britain, but actually all on the southern edge of the ice cap, the Welsh ice cap that came down the Middle Paleolithic right through to the Late Paleolithic. And also there is one site I haven't mentioned, which I think does need to be mentioned, but in the Mendip Hills, that's southwest of Bristol, there's a cave there called Goth's Cave, and my colleague Graham Mullin discovered a very interesting sort of very, very faint engraving of a possible mammoth. And the other thing we haven't talked about is portable art. We're seeing an awful lot of portable art both in North Wales and in South Wales as well, all around that disintegrating and shrinking ice sheet that occurs. It starts to shrink around about 18,000 years ago and goes to nothing by about 10,000 years. So we've got in the Paleolithic now, I think, a very, very, very rich art tradition. And also, as part of the future work, obviously I'm still looking in caves, so I'm intending to revisit Goth's Cave, and at some point I want to look at also Long Hole along the Gower. I also want to look at Deborah's Hole along the Gower. I also want to look at Hoyle's Mouth, which is in Carmarthenshire, and also Nana's Cave, which is on Cordy Island. These are sites which are in my eyesight, or my crosshairs for the next 2 years. And also we're doing a project, and the reason why I'm in talking to you now from Southern Ireland, because myself and Genevieve and Barbara, we are doing a project called the Lost Bridges Project. And the Lost Bridges Project is basically a predictive modelling on caves within Southern Ireland, because my view is that if we've got it in Wales, we've got it in Ireland as well, because there was probably a land bridge, a lost bridge between southwest Wales and southeastern Ireland around about between 17 and 15,000 years ago. Yes, there was a channel coming through called the St. George's Channel, which was basically a channel for ice meltwater coming through from the glaciers that were there in Cumbria and in western England, and as they were shrinking, they were releasing an awful lot of water. It was all going south into the Atlantic Ocean via the St. George's Channel. But we're here to explore between 30 and 50 cave sites at first in County Clare, which we'll be tackling in 2 days' time, and then next year we'll be thinking about another project of phase 2, hopefully to look at more caves in other counties of Southern Ireland. So the Lost Bridges Project, remember that name. That'll be the next big project that we're doing. So we haven't just stopped. We are expanding our views on what is going on.
And I suppose that this rediscovery is just basically justifying the existence of these projects and saying, look at this, there has to be more, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That if this one is here, then along the coast and well, at least along the border of the ice, there must have been, people were progressing north, I suppose, as the ice was retreating.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so you're pretty much doing the same. You're following the path that people made 70,000 years ago, progressing with the retreating ice.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, the way I would sum up is I'm very, very proud to be part of a project, part of the First Art team, and working with my colleagues Genevieve and Barbara. And the only snag is, and you'll probably might laugh at this, and so your viewers, I wish I was 30 years younger and a bit more fitter. Because but I mean, some of the caves
don't we all?
Yeah, well, some of the caves that I've been involved in, especially with First Art team, are, I would call, for me, a bit of a problem. My body isn't as bendy as it was, say, 30 years ago, and that's the big problem. And the big frustration is that a lot of these sites, you'll see there's a pattern emerging, that it's not just they're not painting around the entrances, which I wish they would. They're painting it within the inner recesses of these caves in sometimes very, very difficult areas. For example, last week I was involved in the First Art dating and DNA team, dealing with extracting pigments for sampling, for dating, for RAM spectroscopy and DNA, and these were in Andalusia. So I was doing Cueva de la Victoria, Ardiles, and what's the other one? God, I've lost my brain. It'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, we were doing this sampling, and these were in difficult parts of the cave. So I just wish I was a little bit younger to get down. I mean, I do it, but I have that inherent fear that an old man is going to get stuck one day, and that's the big problem.
All for science.
All for science. All in the name of science. Yeah, you got it. All in the name of science. Maybe I one day I'll become a scientific relic myself.
Well, I think George, thank you. I think we have a great picture of Bacon Hole's story and how it's basically contributing for people to understand that in a way, for me, it's not just the science itself and the discovery and the fact that people it's this idea that humans have changed, but not as much as we probably think they have along the years. You know, we do art, and you were describing that it might be figurative, semi-figurative, or it might be abstract. We still do it, and at the end of the day, it seems like it's all we take. it's the art itself, it's the culture, and not a whole bunch of other things that we might be worried about. And so thank you very much. I think this is a great addition to the research paper and to what we can then tell about Bacon Hole and the personal stories that you just told. So I think it's super interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.